mean, but they don't know for a fact what they meant. But still, this was what we call today picking. They would pick that, and they would from both sides until they popped a hole into it. Okay, that's where they learned how to make bagels
Did you make
and donuts.
Did you make that one?
Yes.
By pecking it?
Yes.
How many hours did it take?
Oh my God, it took forever. But I wanted to learn how they did it, and that's what I did. Matter of fact, I made this one too. Doesn't look like much, but it does. But it did wonders for these people back then. And I'll get to that in a second. But this one right here is very important because what they would do, they would get this right here, and they would put that on the end of their stick. That was their digging stick, and they would use that to dig. And they did a good job. Look at all the canals they built. They go from one end of the valley to the other, and in all different directions. Of course, nowadays you can't see which way they go off in the directions because they're either covered up by this hotel, by this hospital, or maybe where we are. Maybe there was some right through here, but they're all covered up. Okay, but that's what and all that did was just give it more weight. That's all that did. So when that stick was worn out, they could always get another one. Back in the hole it goes. Back to digging. So they couldn't give up on digging because there was probably somebody out there cutting another branch for them to get ready for another digging stick. Okay, keep going, guys. And the basket makers, that's what they used to get the dirt out with, and the stone or whatever they had to get it out and dump it. They were using baskets. So I would think the basket makers they were tall cotton. They were probably making money. No, they weren't having money back then. They were probably, they were trading quite good back in those days. So, and even back then, the people, some were good at different things. Maybe, okay, they're only good at digging holes, so you go out there and dig. Okay, no, but they all did. I think they all took turns in that. But some maybe were making arrows, some were making baskets, some were making pottery. They were doing different things, and there was a lot of trading going on. Okay, a lot of trading going on. But it's just like these here. Like these arrows right here, somebody was making those. Now these particular arrows that you see right here are actually the way they made these, and that is the kind of material that was actually how they were made. Because the wood that the shafts are made from, it's a desert plant. Okay, they were made right in this part of the world. This is a desert plant right here, and believe it or not, well today, I don't know what they called it back then, God only knows, but today we call that arrowweed. Okay. Now, when I made these shafts right here, I made them the same way the native people made them, okay? And if you see, some of them got a little bit of a burn mark on them. They got little burn marks on them. You can see another one up here. And the reason for that is that's how they straightened them. They put this over the fire, or in the fire, or over the fire, and they would straighten them that way. And that's how they straightened them. And that's how I did these. Now, the reason why I got these four right here is this particular one right here. Now, today, that has a name today. They do sell them today. Okay, and these are called flu-flu arrows. Well, back then, when they made these, I'm talking about the Hohokam Indians, even past that, this was a bird arrow. See, it's a blunt point. It does not have a point on it. Okay, so it's blunt. That was for hunting birds, quail, things, birds. This other one's right here, they were hunting arrows. This one here, that tip, that point right there, was a bone point made out of bone. They might have gone after the stagecoach with that one, I don't know. But that was a bone point. This one right here was a stone point, and that's the one you see in the movies all the time and everywhere. They've always got stone on the end. Well, they made a lot of them like that. Don't get me wrong, but they did. But that was one of the points that they made from stone. Another one was actually obsidian, and that's obsidian right here. That's what this part here is made out of. That arrow right there. That's made out of obsidian. You see a lot of those too. Okay, that's a stone, just like this one is. Okay, now this is one that a lot of people don't know that they made them out of, and they did, because in this part of the world that we're in the desert where we are, they didn't have that much obsidian. They might have had a little bit up near Flagstaff, because obsidian is actually volcanic rock. It comes from volcanoes. Silicone. It's actually that's actually glass. Okay, so that's where they got that obsidian from. Arizona didn't have that much. They couldn't find. We have a little bit up over by Superior. That's what they call the Apache Tears. Now that's obsidian. look how they're small, you know, they're small. Up north, they've got mountains made of that, you know, big mountains. But here in the desert, what they also made points out of was wood. And that's ironwood. Ironwood is very, very hard. Very hard. Matter of fact, a lot of the carvings you see come from Mexico, and yeah, mostly from Mexico, a lot of the carvings are made from ironwood. And it's a beautiful wood, but it's very hard. And that's one thing they would make arrowheads out of. Matter of fact, down here I've got some that's made from an antler. There's your bone. There's your ironwood. And then these are stone over here.
What's their favorite?
Their favorite was whatever they could find, whatever they could get, whatever was around them, what they could get to, you know, readily have on hand. It's just here in the desert, it was a very harsh climate, as you can see. It still is in a sense. But can you imagine living on that mountain? Well, not on the mountain. I mean, at that time, there were walls to it. There were everything. So they had canals out here, and they had a lot of plants growing. They were growing their squash, their beans, their corn. They were growing their cotton. After all, where'd they get their T-shirts from? They were growing all that cotton. Okay, and that was a trade item. Cotton was a trade item because the people here, they didn't have seashells, and the people that were here, they loved seashells. Oh, they love seashells, especially like glycymerus. They call them glycymerus shells. And some are a little bit bigger. You know? Matter of fact, the gentleman that was here this morning doing the blessing, he was wearing one just like this, the same design, and it's also glycymerus. I talked to him for a little bit over there. They're glycymerus, and that's this shell. The Indians that were here, they loved this seashell because they could make so many different things from it. All these different things from it. Matter of fact, they did a lot of shell etching. That's more shell etching right there. They were so good at it, at shell etching, I mean, they did it for, you know, thousands of years. They were so good at it, they were almost as good as I am.
You do that.
Some of you got it. Okay, good. No, but they were very good. I mean, that was one of their specialties, was this glycymerus, because that's in this part of the world they did a lot of that. And I believe back east they did some too, but they were really good at it here, and that was one of their things. And they traded a lot with that. Matter of fact, they also traded with Mexico, or even south, you know, further south into South America. They traded a lot of their birds. And especially the feathers. And they love these beautiful macaw feathers, greens and blues and different orange, different colors that they had in these feathers. Well, I understand, I was talking to an archaeologist one time, and he says, you know, he says, it's really weird how they traded with these birds, you know, for the birds, because they love these colorful feathers. And they didn't have those kind here, you know. Oh, we had buzzards and things, you know. But they didn't have those beautiful, colorful feathers in this part of the country. They did in Mexico. They did down, you know, further south. They had them, okay? And that's what they were using for trade. They would bring the feathers, and they would bring the shells. Well, from here they were trading maybe the food. They were trading, maybe they were trading the cotton. So they had trade items going back and forth. So when they got together, maybe halfway or whatever they did, what'd they do? They had a big party. Let me get together. Anyway, so the Indians here says, hey, we love these feathers. You think maybe we could trade for the real birds? You know, the breathing birds, the real birds? Well, so they got together down there and they said, well, what do you think, guys? You think we can trade some birds for them? Well, if we trade birds, we won't never have, they're going to start growing their own birds, and we won't have any trade. The feather trade will be out. Okay, well, what can we do? Well, I tell you what, let's make a big trade. We'll tell them we'll do that. We'll trade. So what they did make the trade. Next time they came, they brought birds with them. But little did the Indians here know what they did to the birds down there. They got that little obsidian knife, and they fixed those birds. Yeah, they traded for the real birds. No problem, we got them. It was a big trade. I mean, those Indians over here, wow, you know, hey, we're going to give you more because you got all these birds up here. They traded them for birds. That was the last bird they traded for, because once they died, they were gone. They got their feathers from that one bird, but that was about it.
It's kind of like a fraud, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a fraud. I mean, frauds, you know, how long has fraud been going on?
How'd they get back and forth? That's a long way.
Well, they had buses and things. They had Toyotas, you know, they brought them across. Oh, that's TV's time. I'm sorry. No. Well, actually, back then, you stop to think about it. Yeah, it's really weird how they did that, because back then, you know, the kids even think that too. Well, they used horses. There was no such thing as a horse back in the day. Well, I tell you what, 10,000 years ago, we had horses here. They were small, so they say. They found their bones and things, you know, petrified, or I mean, you know. Anyway, they were small animals. But as far as the big horses like they have today, there was no such thing. That was not until the French and the English and all these people, the Spanish brought them over on their ships, and they started turning them loose out here, and that's where they got their horses from. Okay, so you see all these movies about all these Indians with all these horses. That took 1,000 years or better, hundreds of years before they even got horses over here. Okay, so before that, when the Indians first seen them horses, they were using them for food. And you know, they were easy to get, I guess, to shoot them down, you know, whether they were using the bow and arrow or using the atlatl or whatever. That's what they were using the horses for, until they found out, hey, we can ride these things, and they're good pack animals and things like that. And then they started using them for that. But before that, you're talking about how they traded with the Indians. Well, a lot of that was, they did it on foot.
Like
because
stores.
No, I'm talking about they would walk, they would run. They could back in those days. Well, you know, even going back as far as Geronimo, and even maybe just a little before that, they could never catch these renegades, because a lot of them, sometimes they were on foot, and yet the cavalry on horseback could not keep up with them, could not catch them. They were faster than the horses. Not only that, but they could maybe get over some of these mountain passes. The horse had to go around it. But they were out walking or out racing or whatever, the cavalry, because they couldn't catch them. Even though they were on foot, there was no way they could get them.
Did they have communities along that
They also
there?
had, yes. Matter of fact, and the reason why they know that they did have communities along the way, is because out here they've got, and even in the Pueblo Grande, they have what they call ball courts. Okay, that they were sunken, and that's where they believe that they were using them for maybe ceremonies and for ball, having some kind of a ball game. Okay, and what they did, they found these along the way. Okay, and they also found evidence of them living in these, you know, in where they made permanent homes. They were found along the way down into Mexico, so they know that they were traveling that way, and they may have traveled like this, and they might have just gone from place to place.
So the store might not have been all the way in Mexico.
Right.
The store for feathers might have been just...
No, I think they were coming from either further south. They were probably coming from some further south. But they were coming part way, and they were going part way. So it was a mutual, you know, they were going just as far. It depended on what they wanted and what they wanted to trade for. Yes, sir.
Were there any citrus crops here?
Well, let's see, those trees, no.
Not those.
No, I don't think they were here. No, here in the desert, no. What you're going to have, what you see out in our real desert, if you go out further out here in the real desert, you're not going to find any kind of citrus out there. There's a lot of plants out there that, desert plants, that a lot of the native people use, because a lot of the plants out here, and a lot of people don't know that. Well, actually, just looking right out here, I see one plant out here that was and it is today one of the most useful herbal plants there is in the country. And I can see one from right here. Creosote.
Which one?
The creosote.
medicine.
It's the most, yes, for medicine.
So what they use it for?
All kinds of things, all kinds of ailments, from cancer to all kinds of things. Matter of fact,
Dry sore.
Matter of fact, well, actually, going to he was just mentioning Pete there. One thing that they used to use the bark off the mesquite tree, they would boil the bark. You know, boil it, cook it like a tea, but they would boil it, and then they would put their feet in there, as hot as they could stand it. They would put their feet in that tea, like, you know, and that would help with any kind of foot problems they might have had. I mean, all the plants here, desert plants, they use them for all kinds of different medicines. Matter of fact, I don't go out and get flu shots because usually when I get the flu or I feel like I'm getting the flu, if I feel it coming on, I'll use some of these desert plants to help myself because they work. I've used them for years. It's just like when they talk about going out and drinking water from anything, a stream that you see out in the desert here. They say don't drink it. You can get very sick. Yeah, you can. You get giardia. You can poison your system. Okay, you can get very sick from it. Okay. But me, whenever I used to do a lot of hiking all over Arizona and Utah and Nevada, all these southern states here. The way I used to go out with some guys and they always had their water pumps with them to pump the water out of the stream or whatever, and they would ask me, sometimes they didn't know me, and I would be with them out there, and they would be out there using their little pump to get the water, and they would say, hey, you want to borrow our pump? Do you have a pump? I said, no, I don't. What do you want to borrow? No, I don't need it. I just go up to the stream and I just scoop up some water. And I said, I'll wait over there by that rock for you guys. And they'd look at me like I'm nuts because they think, well, you're going to get sick. I said, no, I've been doing this for years. Well, I was purifying my water. I was doing it the way it was done many moons ago. I was using charcoal from my campfire. Because if you ever get sick and maybe you go to and there's other reasons you can get sick from something like that, but let's say you go to the Mexican restaurant and you eat something bad and you go home and oh my stomach, and you really get sick. I know somebody did that one time where I was working, and she told me that the next day or a couple days later. And she said, yeah, so we went to eat Mexican food. My mother got really sick. She must eat something wrong at the Mexican food, and we had to take her to the hospital. And I said, yeah, and what'd they do? She said, well, what they did, they pumped her stomach out. Well, actually what they do, they give you something to drink to bring it out. And to get all the poisons back out of you. And then she said, you know what they did then? And I said, what did they do? She said, they made her drink this black liquid. And I said, really? Did they tell you what it was? He said, yeah. They said it was charcoal. Just like you've been telling me. There was, I don't know if you've ever seen this on TV, on Discovery channels. They had this one where they had all these young Marines, and they had them on a survival walk or trek or whatever you want to call it. They had them way up in the mountains, and they were giving them rabbits, and they had to skin them, and, kill them, skin them, and then cook them, and then keep them as they went so they could eat a little bit as they went. Well, one of them got really sick, and it was right near the end of the trip, too. I mean, it was just, I think another day they had to go, and that was it. But he got so sick. Oh, my God, he was sick. And he wouldn't drink. The DI told him, here, I want you to drink this, And the guy said, what is that? He told him, I'm not going to drink that. I can't drink that. It'll make me sick. He said, no, it's not going to make you sick, soldier. It's going to make you feel better, make you well. No, I'm not going to drink. Well, he would not drink that, and they had to take him back. So in order for him to complete that segment of his training, he had to go through that whole thing all over again. He couldn't just go that one day and finish it. He had to do the whole thing again. But anyway, if they had been doing that from the very get-go, from the very start, they would have had no problem. But they didn't. But at the last day, right here, drink this stuff, it'll make you well. To me, that was so. But then again, I'm not a DI. I'm not in the service. I was at one time, but I was in the Army. But I was never in the Marine Corps, and I was never on that trek there.
I think maybe you've got natural protection also from the water.
You do to a point. You do to a point. There's some people that can go out in the desert, or I'm going to say desert because that's where we are. You can go out in the desert and you can start eating some of that natural food that's out there, and you can get sick. They make you ill. I know I've been out with people like that. Oh yeah, they had just finished a big old hamburger on this trip. We were out there about a week, actually 8 days I think it was, and they got sick because their stomach couldn't take the foods that we were eating out there. And that's the reason, because I guess their stomach was still full of grease, I guess, or whatever. And here we were out there eating roots and beans, and, full of trees and things like that.